Hello, industry explorers. Welcome to another episode of How to Start a Career In. Today, we are going to be talking about DevOps. And I have my good friend, Chris Jenkins, here with me today. Chris, how are you today?
What's up, everyone? I'm good.
Love having you here. This is your second time on our show, and I'm very excited to get started. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the Chief Digital Officer for the Symphony Agency, which is a healthcare communications and marketing firm. And as Chief Digital Officer, I'm responsible for digital transformation and essentially all the technology aspects of the organization.
As just a quick note or quick question, has 2020 or 2021 been a unique year for you, given that there's so many more people using telehealth these days?
It actually has been super interesting. We've done a lot of research and trying to figure out how healthcare practices are doing, and telehealth is essentially one of those places where they were able to fill in some gaps. I think I'm more interested to see how much telehealth is going to continue to be used now that we're seeing some of the restrictions lifted, whether people are just going to opt to go back to traditional care. So that remains to be seen.
I mean, I may be a little biased just because I'm a millennial or Gen Z person, depending on who you ask. I like the telehealth because to me it seems more accessible and it's also a lot more convenient. And who wants to be in a lobby or office when they're coughing and sick with other people who are also, who knows what else they have? Anyway, so let's get on track here. Let's talk about DevOps. Can you tell us, as a whole industry, and I know that's a kind of opening a can of worms here, but can you tell us about the tech industry as a whole, and then we'll move right into where DevOps fits into all of it?
So, a lot of the portion of technology that I think most people are familiar with is the development side. You've got programmers writing code, building products and websites, web applications, things along that line, whatever the case may be. And you've got operations in a business, which is often thought of as being outside of the technology space for a lot of companies. And DevOps is really where those two things get married. It's developers can't operate in a bubble. The larger the company that gets, the more important it is that you've got strong operational support for development. And so DevOps becomes more and more critical at scale.
So who are some of the departments that you work with most often?
Me personally? Or you mean with DevOps?
Sure. I mean, you personally, or we could kind of compare between like a small business versus a larger corporation if you're a DevOps
That's actually
individual
a
in either of
really
those
good place
spaces.
to start. Yeah. In smaller businesses, DevOps is not often its own thing. It's a series of roles and responsibilities that frequently the developers themselves who are probably going to be responsible for, and somewhat supported by management, depending on how tech savvy your management team is. In larger organizations, when the needs and the infrastructure become so much greater, you have to have this as a standalone functionality because it can't be actively managed by the same people building the product. It's too complex at that point. But you're going to see, if you are in the DevOps space, so to speak, you're not necessarily just a DevOps engineer. You might be a sysadmin, you might be a developer, you might be a cloud engineer or a deployment engineer, or you might be any number of like operation support roles. I do a lot of architecture. Architect is definitely a DevOps position because you're really thinking about the structure of the infrastructure that's getting built underneath it and planning that out, based on the projected need.
Wow. I'm trying not to like let my eyes gloss over because I am not a tech person, but I am here for the audience members who are all about this industry. And I'm very excited to like dive into some of the questions about what college degree is needed or what certificates are needed. But let's save those questions for later. For now, take us through a project in the life of someone in a DevOps position.
So typically, most people, when they're thinking about the product, they're going to start with development, right? You've got a developer who's sitting down, he's writing some code, or she's testing, or whatever the case may be. That's all in the product development part. At some point in time, that code that's being written has to be delivered or delivered to the end user. And that's where developers begin to integrate with the DevOps process. DevOps fundamentally is concerned with four major areas: automation, uptime, delivery, and security. So when a developer is turning in code or deploying code through Git or whatever method they're using, now that's coming into the DevOps arena. And it's the DevOps job to schedule and actually perform the delivery of that code through things like continuous integration. There's a lot of programs out there, a lot of products out there where you can't stop the product to load new code. If you think about a site like eBay, for instance, they can't have an hour of downtime to just load some new code up and test it. They're doing continuous integration where they're injecting code into this environment live. That's what DevOps is doing. They're setting up these very delicate deployments. They're making sure that servers aren't going down while that's happening. They're minimizing any downtime. And as much as possible, they're automating this process so it doesn't require a lot of physical handholding along the way. If you have a series of tests and QA and security checks and all the rest of those things, DevOps engineers build out automation for those processes.
So if a DevOps team is integrating new code to a live site and a server goes down, are they then responsible for, I know this isn't the right word, but like revitalizing the server, bringing the server back online? Or is that maybe a different department that then has to come in and do some damage control or emergency services of that nature?
I mean, generally, yeah, it's going to be your DevOps team that's doing that. It's probably not going to be necessarily a DevOps engineer. It might be a sysadmin or an IT administrator, but it's probably going to be within the DevOps team. If something crashes, they're the ones who help undo the damage and get it back up and running.
Is DevOps something that can be done remotely, or are there? Okay, are there benefits to having these types of teams in an office environment?
Well, I mean, that's a bigger argument, but let's start with the first part of it. Most of the environments that DevOps are working in are probably going to be in a cloud connected data center, either through a major provider like AWS or Azure, or through an on-prem, meaning literally we have servers in our own data center that we control. But those servers are cloud connected as well. It's pretty rare that you actually have to be the one to go in and like physically remove a hard drive, for instance, or something along that line for a lot of DevOps roles, because they're generally working in the cloud and there's a cloud engineer who's already taking care of that kind of stuff, So, in most cases, and I know a lot of folks who are architects or DevOps engineers who work remote all the time or travel frequently and work abroad. And as long as you've got good connectivity to whatever that cloud solution is, you should be fine. So I would say 90% of DevOps jobs probably could be performed remotely to at least some degree.
Yeah, this sounds like a really good option for people who may want to have the ability to just up and move wherever. Maybe they have a partner or a family member that they need to be nearby or live with, or they just want to travel often. What is like the salary? I should make this an official question. What's kind of a salary range for someone in this position?
It's probably going to vary pretty widely because of the broad scope of roles and the broad level of experience that you can potentially have in the space. I think walking in even lower level or entry level jobs, if you've got a decent amount of knowledge and provable experience in the space, you can probably expect to get in at maybe 65, 75K, and that's really on the low side. I think an average spread of salaries for folks who've been in for a few years is probably in the 95 to 105, 110 range, and then senior engineers, you're going to be 135, 150 and up, depending on the scope of the organization and all the rest of that. I mean, I imagine if you're a DevOps engineer for Google, for instance, you're probably comfortably over $250,000 salary.
I'm really hoping that there are students who are hearing all of this, because this is not an option that was presented to me when I was in school. And frankly, I wouldn't take it because this is just not the way my mind works. I'm not this type of person. But still, I've never heard of DevOps, and I don't think it's a relatively new industry. I mean, certainly it's been around since I was in high school, which was like yesterday. Just no, I'm so kidding. Okay, so this sounds like a really high stakes type of role because,
Yes.
as you said, a site like eBay cannot afford to be down for even an hour. Same thing with any infrastructure for hotels or casinos or security, like you name it. So in such a high stakes role, what are some essential technical skills?
Well, for a lot of this stuff, you're going to need to know how to write automation scripts. That's going to be a big part of it, and to understand the infrastructure and security aspects, and to understand like continuous integration tools and compliance and patching and all the rest of that. So first and foremost, you have to have a good understanding of hardware, especially cloud hardware and network hardware. You're going to need to know some scripting languages. Python is probably one of the most common languages for this. Ruby as well. Perl for all you old school CGI scripters. I don't know how many of those are left, but Perl is definitely one of those languages out there. You should know Linux and Unix server architecture and be comfortable with those OSs and how to interact with them remotely. CLI stuff for all the folks out there paying attention. You should probably know Vi or Vim or some other on-server text editor. And then you have to at least have some training in common tools in the space. You're going to have continuous management tools like Puppet or Ansible, continuous integration tools like Jenkins, which I'm fond of given my name, but also Bamboo and Travis. Testing tools and especially like containerized testing tools working within Docker or other containered environments, and then networking or network monitoring applications, maybe like a Splunk or a Sensu or one of those type things. So like mostly it's understanding the environments and the tools along with a little core scripting and development skill.
Okay, this is the most informative YouTube video that there has to be out there about DevOps. Changed my mind. Y'all should have had your pen and papers out. Sorry I didn't warn you about all of this golden information that you needed to write down, but what a list. Dang. Your call to action and your homework is to write down everything that Chris just said and go Google the crap out of all of that. Now, being that we just talked about how this is a remote job 90% of the time.
Or can.
are there essential soft skills? Because I think when people think about technology spaces and roles in technology, they're thinking, oh, this is perfect if I'm an introvert, or this is perfect if I don't even want to use the word shy. We'll just stick to introvert. What, is there a lot of speaking with the clients? Who are your clients? How often are you speaking with team members? And again, what are the essential soft skills of this role?
I think it's, you mentioned earlier that it is it's a live support role, right? It's not it's like a combat role where you may spend 65 hours bored and then 4 hours in full on panic. So, like, fundamentally, you've got to be the kind of person who is capable of staying calm, cool, and collected under what may be extreme pressure. Because when you have a big outage, I mean, imagine every single time you've heard about a downtime at Google or a downtime at Facebook or anything else. When those things are happening, you're annoyed because, oh, my post didn't go through or something along that line. But there are 100 engineers who are under pressure. They are running around with their hair on fire, trying to resolve and get whatever this issue fixed is, because minutes of downtime are unacceptable for these kinds of applications. And so, first and foremost, you have to be the kind of person who can be calm, cool, and collected under pressure. You have to be able to communicate clearly under high stress in ways that aren't going to turn into fights internally in your organization. You have to be good at accepting direction from people who are, your technical superiors, so to speak, if you're all working together and collaborating on getting a fix in place. You absolutely, communication is key. Performance under pressure is key. And being able to give great writing and communication skills. You're going to have to write RFOs, reasons for outage. And you have to be able to clearly and technically communicate what the cause was, why it happened, what the solution was, what steps are going to be taken to prevent that from happening again.
I'm sorry, did you say communication and writing skills? So what you're saying, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but are you saying that all the essays that our teachers are making us write are actually kind of helpful?
I mean, it's, a lot of people I don't think really get in the habit of professional writing because they're really not exposed to it much. And in the technology space, you are going to have to be able to write very well-formed and often compelling technical documents that are precise and demonstrate a high level of professionalism. So absolutely.
Yeah. And, it makes me think of all of the essays or all of the writing assignments you may be assigned, whether you're in high school or any sort of higher education. It seems like a lot and it seems overwhelming, but if you can get, proficient at putting out a product in a timely manner, that's really what matters, and not so much to focus on the perfection of it, of the outcome, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. Really, what you can gain out of these situations is just practicing being faster, I suppose, with quality. Man, someone is going to take what I just said and be like, she is wrong. Don't listen to her. Don't. Oh. I got to be careful with what I say sometimes. All the time, actually. So this is absolutely geared towards high school students and maybe people who are looking into changing careers. So if I'm a high school student and let's say I think I'm interested in DevOps, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for college. I don't know if I want to go to community college or I don't even know what I want to do. I just want to take a gap year to figure out what I'm interested in. What should I do if DevOps sounds interesting to me? What would I do in that year? And again, this is for the parents and the teachers who say gap years are a waste of time, because they're not.
Well, what's interesting about DevOps is that, and a lot of technology roles share this, development shares this as well. Depending on the company, there's not a degree requirement at all. The most important thing is, do you have the skill set? Do you know how to operate the tools and all the rest of that? And so if you're deciding whether or not you want to go to college, but you're maybe interested in something in a DevOps space, make it 2 gap years and instead spend a little time taking some of the online training stuff that's available out there to learn about these things. I would probably start by picking one environment, let's say AWS, because that's a big one and a lot of people are on there, and go take the AWS infrastructure certification. You should be able to get through that in a couple of months or so, or depending on your work pace, obviously. But those are all self-paced training. And so you'll learn how to use all the tools that AWS has to offer, how to use the secret keeper and lambdas and all these cool little things that they have that DevOps engineers use to build these environments. And pick some minor development project, figure out how to write a Python script to automate an update, just some little simple achievable thing, and just start playing with it and messing with it. And if that light bulb goes off and you go, aha, if you have that moment when you deploy something and you see it show up and start working, then maybe this is the right place for you.
I love that. So it sounds like that, like taking a couple gap years is totally acceptable. And even if you're taking a break, you're still moving the needle. You're still making progress toward your goal. And perhaps without going into debt.
I know a lot of people who either had a completely unrelated degree, like this one woman who was a QA engineer. Her original degree was in history. It was completely unrelated to technology entirely. She just got interested in this space and so started learning and moving into that. And I think that with technology, you have the benefit or the sort of unexpected perk of having the opportunity to do it backwards if you want to. Because you can go get some certifications, do some self-study, do some experimentation, maybe find a summer internship, paid internship, or some other sort of entry-level position or something along that line, and get your feet wet in the industry, and then decide, after a year or two, okay, I want to move ahead in this. So which degree would be interesting to help move me forward on this path? And I think if you take that approach, yes, on one hand, you might be juggling, working while being in school, or maybe you just, quit that entry level job and go focus and put your head down on school for 2-3 years, whatever way you want to approach it. But it might actually be a better way to approach college because you're fundamentally knowing exactly what you want to do. And so you're training for that,
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice. If you do end up going the college route, say you take your gap year or not, and you have your aha moment, what are some degrees that would help attain the role of, maybe being a senior DevOps individual?
I mean, most of it's going to be in the sort of comp sci / electronics engineering kind of space. I don't really particularly know what exact focus would be the best goal for that. To be perfectly honest, I mean, I haven't even looked at the degree section on resumes in my hiring in some time. I'm much more interested in their actual demonstrable skill set and experience. So I can't even really answer that question very precisely, but probably in the comp sci / hardware infrastructure space.
Yeah, that's, it's really refreshing to hear that, because when students are in high school, they just receive so much pressure to go to college, and not just that, but to go to college immediately after graduating from high school. And, there's a lot of people who they get their college degree and then end up working in a totally unrelated field. So, yeah. What you mentioned an AWS infrastructure certification at the beginning, and you mentioned maybe trying to attain that during a gap year. Are there any other certificates or certifications that would be helpful in moving the needle along?
LinkedIn, they have what's Learning by LinkedIn or something like that. They actually have a free DevOps course that you can take, which is sort of an intro to DevOps. So I would definitely start with that, because that's going to give you a high level view and some like immediate usable knowledge. Containerization is super important, and probably the biggest player in that space is Docker. So becoming a Docker certified associate is a great thing to have on your resume. Kubernetes is a very, very popular environment as well. Puppet, the management platform, has a professional certification. Google offers a significant number of courses around this, and many of them are free through their own Google Learning Center. I absolutely recommend like jumping all over that. Oh, and Terraform is another very, very popular scripting solution that allows you to do like big deployment type stuff and to set up servers and such. So all of those. Yes. And a lot of these are free. You can find a ton of like paid stuff out there, but LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Google all offer a significant amount of free training. You just have to go do it.
I like free. I like free 99. That sounds a lot better than going into debt for, who knows how much a college degree is costs these days.
A lot, apparently.
40,000 a year, maybe 60,000 a year. I mean, I actually recently looked at my alma mater and saw what the undergraduate cost was per year, and it was like 20 grand. And I thought to myself, that's it? And then I thought to myself, whoa, I'm at a point in my life where I can look at that cost and say, oh, that's not too bad. But that's because I've been working professionally since I was 18, 19 years old. And so I'm at a point where like I can afford to, I frequently think about going back to school to maybe pursue something else, or even just for the sake of learning more and expanding my knowledge and applying it. And, because I'm all over the place. Who knows what I'm going to end up doing this year, next year, 5 years from now. Here's a great question for you, Jinx. When it comes to mental health and your work, how do you balance the two?
Oof. Boy, that one came out of left field.
It totally did. I just thought of it.
When you work in these kinds of industries, right, you do have to eat a high level of stress for a long amount of time, Mm-hmm. So if you're the kind of person who, is already under stress from mental health issues or things along that line. I mean, I have personally watched a developer have a breakdown, a serious needs some medical intervention breakdown before, because of the amount of stress that can exist in these roles sometimes. And it's never pretty, and I don't think badly of that developer. I don't, there's no negative judgment from me. I was just concerned in the moment, I'm like, and he eventually got the help that he needed and all the rest of that, and, onward and upward and a solid positive outcome. But there is a significant amount of pressure that gets put on people in various live support tech roles like this, that can lead up to, some pretty significant mental health issues over time, depending on what else you might be dealing with in your home environment and, any number of other considerations. For me personally, making sure I aggressively carve out some downtime for myself every now and then. It's not really a habit that I was in because I was always in go mode. And so it was something that my wife kind of had to drag me into and make me be better about, Mm-hmm. But it's critically important. And I think that there's always this unspoken pressure sometimes inside companies to, okay, oh, well, you're taking your PTO. Well, damn right, it's your PTO, take it, and especially when you need it. Don't push yourself thinking, well, I can eventually do that. No, when that pressure is building up, you need healthy outlets. You need some downtime. You need to go spend some time with friends and family, go outside, walk in the park, touch your dog, take those moments because they are critical. And there is a culture and technology to burn yourself out and grind yourself to death. Don't do it. It's not good for you. It's not healthy physically or mentally. And it's not going to actually contribute anything to your well-being over the long term. You're just going to ship a product a few days faster,
Mm-hmm. And there is a culture of burning yourself out and not taking PTO. Is it like kind of centered around, making people feel guilty and like a disappointment to the company?
It's, measuring performance in technology has had some issues over the years because there's 100 ways to quantify it, but really it's mostly qualitative.
Hmm.
Mary might turn in 1,000 lines of code. David might turn in 800 lines of code. David's has less lines of code. Did he do less? Well, no, maybe his code is more efficient. Mary
Right.
had more lines of code. Did that mean that hers was not as good as David's? No, maybe it means that she spotted something in the logic that needed to be done that David didn't. So because of that, a lot of times management sort of holds all the power when it comes to determining your advancement and how well you're doing within that space. And so these other sort of soft qualifiers start to become a thing, like, well, how good of a culture fit are you, and are you a team player, and things that can be wildly outside of your control. I was
Hmm.
a production manager in a company that I won't name here, but anyways, we would only get a max of 3% raise annually, which, by the way, is already insulting. Fight for more, always. Pro tip from me to
Hmm.
you. But the part of your raise was based on your team's feedback about you. And I had somebody on the team who just didn't like me as a person. And so in our peer review, they're like, he's not a team player. And I got half of my 3% raise docked because I wasn't a team player. So I got a 1.5%
Wow.
raise that year. And I immediately started making plans to leave at that point because, I'm not even beating inflation. Why should I stay?
Right.
So, you've got all these weird sort of sociocultural dynamics that exist within the technology space. And we've heard about some of them, Silicon Valley's bro culture and all these other, like things that you run into.
Hmm.
Those are all present. They're going to be there. It's going to be outside pressure, all the rest of that. Fight for you always. Fight for your own growth, fight for your own advancement, fight for the space that you need to balance your work and your personal life, and especially fight for the space that you need to maintain your mental health, because it's critical.
And all of that takes practice. It's honestly difficult to set those boundaries, those healthy boundaries that are good for you and ultimately good for everybody else, because you cannot give your all to something if you're on half a tank or if you're empty. You're not going to be producing the best quality of whatever it is that you do. So, what does carving out time for yourself look like personally?
Well, so it's I have to plan around taking extended downtime because I have a lot of responsibilities and people are relying on me. So that always takes some work. But one of the things that we started to do was taking 4-day weekends. A Friday off, a Monday off, go find a little Airbnb somewhere within a 1-tank driving trip from your house. I like to find a little spot that's on the water somewhere so I can just like fish in the backyard for a couple of days and really unplug in it like a big way, like have my phone in my tackle box because it's going to get wet otherwise. So I'm not playing with it. I'm fishing.
Hmm.
Really taking the time to actually unplug. Well, a lot of times we say, oh, I've got to unplug for a bit, but 3 hours later, you're back on Instagram scrolling. You're not
Hmm.
unplugged,
Yeah.
disconnect from the technology completely, put all the screens down, engage with something else entirely. Read a book.
Are you reading any books right now?
Oh, I'm reading so many books right now. I always have at least one book or two that I'm running through. Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series. I'm on another spin back through that 14 novel like epic.
Wow.
And it's coming out with a TV show on Amazon Prime, so I have to make sure that I'm all up on the story.
Hmm. Yeah, no spoilers for you. That
Right,
would be
right.
awful. I did not know that you take 4-day weekends and that you just totally unplug. I mean, I've been hearing lately that a person can only really concentrate for so much time throughout the day, and it's not 8 hours.
Mm.
It's less than 8 hours that we can truly dedicate time to concentrate. And I'm sure that varies from individual to individual, but breaks are absolutely essential because it really is a way to recharge your battery. It really is a way to refocus, recenter, and then tackle whatever task you have at hand. So I'm glad that you brought all that up when it comes to work-life integration and balancing work with mental health, especially in the tech space.
There's a book by Cal Newport called Deep Work.
Mm-hmm.
And what it really talks about is how to get the most productivity out of your actual working time. And it's definitely not about 8 hours or anything else. There's too short and too long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And too short happens a lot when you're in the developer space, where someone comes in and interrupts you. We call it context switching. Now I have to stop what I was thinking about, and I may have some complex string of logic in my head that I'm trying to write out and get back together. And if I'm interrupted and I have to context switch and think about something else, when I come back to this, now it's going to take me some amount of time to ramp back up again and figure out, oh, what was I doing?
Right.
But then there's an over amount of time where it starts, like, you start to see a diminishing return for your productivity in that space. And for me, I think the sweet spot has always been right around 2 to 4 hours. If I can't get 2 uninterrupted hours, I won't even start development, because I know that it's just going to be wildly unproductive. I know that I need at least 2. But after 4, you probably should get up and walk around and stretch. And, I'm sure doctors would say more often than that, maybe once an hour or so. But, developers, when they get head down, can sort of lose their, lose sense of time and all that for a little while. Set an alarm, at 4 hours, you should definitely get up and move around and take a break.
Right. Oh, definitely. We had a couple more people just hop on watching live. And if you have a question for Chris Jenkins about how to start a career in DevOps, please ask your question in the audience. Leave a comment. We're happy to ask live, because that's what the live stream is for. But if you are just hopping on with us, he has just given us so many things to write down and Google search and play with, and calls to action already. I mean, you could you could keep yourself busy for a year or two with all of the information Chris has shared with us today. But if no one in the audience is currently asking questions, Chris, would you like to share any industry insights, like anything that might be on your mind? Or do you have a message for parents, teachers, counselors?
Well, from an industry insight perspective, I think that we've really tested aggressively how well workers can work remotely. And we're seeing that with a lot of workers who are now being asked to return to a physical or office environment, there's a lot of backlash associated with that. For companies who, maybe don't have the resources to outcompete larger companies on salary or such, offering remote work when it's possible, when it's absolutely feasible, is a way to make your offer more appealing. So keep that in mind. If you're struggling to fill those roles, offer them as 100% remote if you can support that. Maybe you have them come into a meeting once a month or something along that line for that, like, in-person touch point. But that's definitely one to put out there. For parents, in particular, if you've got a kid one of my kids is starting to get into some of this stuff now, is getting interested in infrastructure, started working on writing some Python and playing with that. Encourage without making it, encourage without demanding, I think, is the phrase that I'd be looking for. There are a lot of these resources out there. Find them yourself and put them in front of your kid, and be like, hey, check this out. And it doesn't matter who your kid is, all of the things, gender, identity, orientation, any of those things, wildly irrelevant. Technology is one of the places where fundamentally you can demonstrate skill and really advance based on merit in ways it's a lot more difficult in other industries. Now, I'm certainly not saying that our industry is perfect. We've had our share of notable and public, examples of where that fails. But I think it's a lot more equitable than many other industries because it's so fundamentally skills based.
And you are a wonderful demonstration of that because not that this is a big deal to some people, but I think some people need to see your nails. Look at
Freshly
those.
blinged up. Yes.
I mean, like, Chris is a highly skillful person, has done extremely well for himself, and is just an all-around terrific person. And so who cares if he gets his nails done? Who cares if he's got a really awesome blue ombre in his hair? Bottom line is you can totally be yourself in this sort of space because it's so based on merit.
Yeah.
And I really truly love that you brought that up, says the girl with the green hair. But I think that's something that's very important to point out to people, right? Especially people who may feel like they are the other in most spaces. This is a safe space. Like, y'all are welcome here, and maybe consider a career in DevOps.
There's the bigger the company is, the more conservative you'll probably find it to be over the long term in general. But there are so many great opportunities in the startup space in particular where they're so desperate for the skill that, any of the sort of old school, I'm just going to call it bigotry. You're just less likely to see. They need your skill. They need you there. So whoever you are, go get in there, join.
Absolutely. I had a thought and it has escaped me. That always happens on my live streams. It's so embarrassing. Darn. Well, I was going to wrap it up anyway. Oh, I remember what I was going to mention. You mentioned that some of the bigger corporations are still more conservative spaces. And I know you personally, and I know that you will tie your hair back and maybe not display your nails because if you're having a virtual meeting, well, you just know your audience, right? That's also important.
I think anybody who's out there who has had to operate in a marginalized space is familiar with the phrase code switching. We certainly do that from time to time. And, you have to be pragmatic to some degree about that, but if you're going to be welcome anywhere, it's going to be in technology.
I love that so much. And I just want to ask again, because my mind cannot wrap around this. Is there, you don't have to have a college degree to be successful in this industry?
I don't have a college degree at all. Any.
Wait, you've probably told me that, but that's still surprising. I feel like it just doesn't get old for me. Because I grew up being told you have to have a college degree to be successful, and here you are.
I mean, I was told the same thing, and because of that, it really mentally held me back for some years.
Wow.
I realized that I liked playing with computers and all the rest of that, but I always assumed that nobody would hire me without the bachelor's, BS in comp sci or something along that line. It just fundamentally wasn't true. They care about the skills more than anything else, and they can test you on the skills, and that makes a huge difference. It's hard to test if somebody's going to be a good business analyst or a good lineman or whatever. In a lot of trades, you fundamentally are expected to suck when they hire you, and they're just going to train you how to do that job. With technology, if you've got a great portfolio of work, if you can walk in and they go, okay, deploy a Docker instance on AWS with Kubernetes and create a Terraform script, you can either do it or you can't. And if you can, then boom, we're halfway there, So it really makes a significant difference. Now, I don't want to underplay or understate what the value of a good college degree is, or a good college education. College exposes you to people in your space who are interested in the same thing, so you build a good number of connections. It gives you exposure to theory that you may not have been exposed to, and also offers lab time to practice those things in a guided environment with an instructor. There's a lot of value to all those things. And if you start start getting into some of the heavier, more advanced stuff, you are going to start running into requirements for, say, a BS in comp sci, or, you know, for some of the higher end jobs at Google, maybe even a PhD in like numbers theory or probability, or you know, stuff like that, when they're writing very, very complex algorithms. So you may, after some time in the technology space, go to college and get a degree that's relevant to what you're trying to do. But it's absolutely not a necessity to get a job in the space. And as I'd like to think that I illustrate well, to retire from the space in a reasonably comfortable way, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on my show. It's just going to help so many people. I know it. And again, I can't thank you enough, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Always a
Everybody,
pleasure, and hope your audience gets a lot of value about it.
Yes, like just yes. They can't not get value out of this. You guys can follow Chris at I'm Mr. Dubious. And where can they find you with that handle?
Twitter.
Nice.
I'm no longer on the gram at all. I have no Facebook apps on my mobile device.
Wonderful. Well, follow Chris on Twitter at I'm Mr. Dubious, and explorers, until next time, I will see you guys on our next adventure. Take care, everybody.